It began like every mother's dream. The day her daughter's hands were covered in henna, her face glowing beneath a veil of gold and hope. I watched Noor smile through her wedding, her eyes glimmering with the innocence that only love can create. She looked like sunlight itself, wrapped in promises. When her husband's family embraced her that day, I believed, perhaps foolishly, that she was stepping into a home that would cherish her. I saw their smiles, their words dipped in sweetness, and I convinced myself she was safe. Mothers do that. We silence our fears when our children are happy. The first few weeks were full of calls, laughter, and little stories of adjustment. She told me about the new dishes she was learning to cook, the little traditions she was trying to follow. I heard her voice tremble sometimes, but she always masked it with a laugh. "They're just particular about things, Amma," she'd say. "I'll get used to it." And I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that love could smooth out the sharp edges of cruelty. But in her laughter, I began to hear something hollow. A space where her light used to live. There were moments she tried to tell me more, but she stopped herself, as if she was protecting me from worry or protecting herself from punishment. Once, she came home for a weekend. She looked thinner, quieter. Her wrists bore faint marks she said were from cooking burns. I touched them, and she pulled away too fast, her eyes darting, as though afraid someone might see. I didn't push. I just held her close that night, and she trembled like someone who had forgotten what safety felt like. Her husband's family had wealth, influence, and an image that demanded perfection. Noor, with her soft voice and gentle heart, was easy to break. They didn't yell, they didn't need to. Their cruelty was colder, sharper, silence at the table, whispered judgments, doors closed behind her. She told me once, "They don't like when I talk much." That sentence echoed in me for days. My daughter, the one who used to fill our house with stories, who laughed so loud the neighbors knew her mood, was being taught to stay silent. But I didn't yet know how deep the rot went. I still believed, in some fragile way, that things would change. That time and kindness could soften even the hardest hearts. When she called less often, I thought it was because she was busy with her new life. I didn't realize she was fading. I didn't realize every smile she forced was a goodbye in disguise. The illusion held until the night it shattered completely. The night I got the call that changed everything. Looking back, I see it clearly, how I mistook civility for care, how I mistook silence for peace. The family of my son-in-law had never wanted a daughter. They wanted a servant in silk. And I, blinded by hope, handed them my most precious thing. The days that followed her marriage began to feel heavy, as if the air around Noor carried something unspoken. Her voice changed. The spark that used to dance in her tone dulled, replaced by something cautious, measured. When I'd ask how she was, she'd always start with, "I'm fine, Amma." But there was a pause before the words, the kind that hides pain too big to say. The subtle signs came quietly, wrapped in everyday moments that only a mother's heart could notice. At first, it was the way her visits home grew shorter. She used to stay for days, helping me in the kitchen, laughing over old stories. Now, she'd arrive with tension in her shoulders, glancing at her phone often, as if waiting for a command. "They get upset if I don't return quickly," she'd say, smiling in a way that didn't reach her eyes. Once, she forgot her phone on the table, and I saw over 20 missed calls. All from her mother-in-law. My stomach tightened, but Noor brushed it off. "She just worries too much," she whispered, though her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the phone. Her in-laws had built a world around appearances. Perfect smiles, lavish dinners, polished words that hid the stench of control. They demanded obedience disguised as respect, submission disguised as love. Noor became their perfect target. Soft-spoken, eager to please, too kind to retaliate. They began with small cruelties, criticizing the way she cooked, the way she dressed, even how she spoke. "You talk too much for a new bride," her husband once told her at a family gathering, his tone light but his eyes cold. She laughed it off in front of everyone, but when I met her gaze, I saw her smile cracking from the inside. Her messages became shorter too. Where she used to send me long notes about her day, now I'd get a single line, "Busy today, Amma, talk later," and then silence. I could feel her slipping away, piece by piece. The laughter that once filled her soul had turned into polite responses, her joy replaced by a careful, constant fear. Once, during a festival, I visited her home unannounced. She looked startled to see me. Not happy, not surprised, but afraid. Her mother-in-law greeted me with sugary warmth, calling me sister, while Noor stood behind her, eyes downcast, fingers twisting the edge of her dupatta. I asked if she was eating well. Her husband smiled and said, "Of course she is. We take good care of her." But I noticed the bruises near her wrist, faint and hidden beneath her bangles. That night, when I hugged her goodbye, she clung to me a second too long. It was as if she wanted to say something. To tell me everything. But the words died in her throat. Her silence screamed louder than any confession could. Those were the quiet days before the storm. Days when pain was dressed in politeness, when cruelty hid behind smiles. Noor was living in a house full of shadows, and she was already drowning long before they pushed her into the lake. It was a night etched in my memory with the kind of clarity that pain brings. Cold, cruel, unforgettable. The rain had been falling since evening, soft at first, then harder, as if the sky itself was trying to warn us. I was home, making tea, when the phone rang. A man's voice, trembling, frantic. "Come quickly," he said. "There's been an accident. Noor fell into the lake." For a moment, everything around me froze. The kettle hissed, the clock ticked, but my mind went blank. My daughter. The words didn't make sense. Noor couldn't swim. She was terrified of deep water. How could she fall into a lake? I rushed there, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear my own breath. The lake lay just beyond their grand house, its surface shimmering under the moonlight. But that night, it looked different. Darker, colder, like it had swallowed something it didn't want to give back. There were people gathered, their voices low, eyes filled with staged sorrow. Noor's husband stood there, his clothes wet, face pale. "We tried to save her," he said, shaking his head. "She slipped. It all happened so fast." His words felt rehearsed. His eyes never met mine. I ran to the edge of the water, screaming her name, but only the sound of the rain answered me. The police were already there, their flashlights cutting through the fog, searching, scanning. And then I saw it. The scarf. My daughter's scarf. It was caught on a branch near the bank, fluttering like a flag of grief. I picked it up, my hands trembling. It wasn't torn, it wasn't dragged, it was tied. Neatly, deliberately, as if someone had anchored her there. My knees gave out. I knew then that this wasn't an accident. Hours passed like years. They pulled her body from the water just before dawn. Her face was pale, peaceful almost, as if she had stopped fighting long before she sank. I remember brushing her hair away from her face, whispering her name, but she didn't open her eyes. My Noor, my child, my joy, lay silent, framed by the cold mist that hung over the lake. The people around me spoke in hushed tones, their words distant. So tragic. Poor girl. She should have been more careful. Their sympathy felt poisoned. Later, when the officials questioned the family, their answers were too quick, too clean. They said she had gone for a walk after dinner, slipped near the edge, and fell in. They said everyone had rushed to help but were too late. But I knew my daughter. She was careful. She was cautious. She didn't go near water, not even to dip her feet in it. Something inside me screamed that they were lying. The lake wasn't her mistake. It was their weapon. That night, under the dim glow of police lights, I stood by the water and made a silent promise. They thought they could wash away the truth in the lake's depths. But truth floats, and I would make sure it rose, no matter how long it took. After Noor's death, the house became too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort, it suffocates. Every corner whispered her name, every shadow reminded me of her laughter that once filled the air. People came and went, offering condolences wrapped in pity. They said time would heal, but time didn't heal anything. It just taught me how to hide my pain better. I learned to wear my grief like armor. Silent, heavy, unbreakable. Her husband's family attended the funeral, dressed in white, eyes lowered, voices trembling with practiced sorrow. They stood beside me, pretending to mourn, pretending to share my loss. But their eyes told the truth. There was no guilt, only fear. They were afraid that I might know, that I might see through their carefully crafted act. And I did. I saw it in every forced tear, in every comforting word that didn't belong to them. Yet, I said nothing. I didn't shout, didn't accuse. What good would words do in a world that already believed their lies? In the days that followed, I became a shadow of myself. I stopped visiting people, stopped talking. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted justice. But not the kind that screams. I wanted the kind that waits. Patient, watching, inevitable. I began to visit them often, under the guise of a grieving mother seeking connection, seeking understanding. I brought sweets on religious days, helped them arrange gatherings, even smiled through the pain. They thought I had accepted fate, that I had forgiven them. And that illusion became my weapon. While they relaxed, I observed. I watched how their family worked, how they hid their sins behind wealth and reputation. I learned their weaknesses, their fears, their secrets. I noticed the cracks forming, small arguments, whispers behind closed doors, the growing tension between the husband and his father over money. They had built their lives on lies, and all I had to do was wait for the lies to start eating them from within. At night, I would sit by the window, staring into the darkness, speaking to Noor in my mind. They think it's over, I'd tell her. They think I'm just a grieving mother. But grief can be a dangerous thing when it's quiet. It becomes sharper than a blade. I had nothing left to lose, and that made me stronger than they could ever imagine. When I'd visit them, they'd offer tea with fake warmth. I'd drink it slowly, looking around their house. The same house where my daughter took her last breath. My silence made them nervous. I could feel it. They began to whisper among themselves, wondering if I knew, wondering if I suspected. And that was enough. Fear began to do my work for me. I never raised my voice. I never made threats. I let them believe I was broken. Because sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who appears defeated. I let them see a grieving mother. What they didn't see was the fire beneath my calm, waiting for the perfect moment to burn everything they held dear. Their downfall began quietly, almost invisibly, like cracks forming beneath the surface of glass. They didn't notice at first. No one ever does. They continued with their routines. The expensive dinners, the polished smiles, the false prayers for the daughter-in-law they murdered. But rot has a way of spreading when the foundations are built on lies. I didn't have to lift a finger. I simply let the truth move in silence, like smoke slipping through locked doors. It started with their business. Rumors began to circulate. Whispers of fraud, illegal deals, money taken from the wrong people. It wasn't me who started them, but I knew exactly who would. The same people they had cheated and stepped on in their climb to power now wanted revenge. All it took was one anonymous message, one quiet nudge in the right direction. Investigations followed soon after. Auditors came, police asked questions, and the empire they built with arrogance began to tremble. The son-in-law, who once strutted with pride, now looked pale and restless. He started drinking heavily, snapping at his parents, locking himself away in his office. The mother-in-law who used to humiliate my Noor over burnt bread now walked around with trembling hands, terrified of losing everything she worshipped. Her wealth, her reputation, her perfect image. Neighbors whispered about them, friends began to distance themselves, and invitations that once poured in stopped coming altogether. Then came the betrayal. The kind that destroys from within. Their eldest son, desperate to protect himself, sold their secrets to competitors in exchange for immunity. Every deal they had made, every shady transaction, came crawling out like maggots from under a stone. Their name, once spoken with respect, became a warning. Their company collapsed within months, and creditors swarmed their mansion like vultures. They were stripped bare, piece by piece, until all they had left were each other, and even that was rotting. The husband lost his job. His friends stopped answering his calls. The mother-in-law grew sick, her health failing under the weight of fear and shame. I would visit sometimes, bringing food, pretending to pity them. "You've suffered so much," I'd say softly, watching their eyes flicker with guilt they couldn't name aloud. My kindness cut deeper than any accusation ever could. At night, I'd stand outside their gate, looking at the house where my daughter's laughter once echoed before it was drowned. Now the windows were dark. The air was heavy. The silence inside that home matched the silence in the grave I visited each morning. They had thought they could bury Noor and walk away clean. But they didn't know that the dead have a way of speaking, not through ghosts or voices, but through consequences. Every lie they told had been a stone tied to their own necks, and now, one by one, they were sinking. I never touched them. I didn't need to. Revenge was already moving, patient, poetic, and unstoppable, through the same world that once turned its back on my daughter. Now, when I walk to the lake where Noor's life ended, the air feels different. It's quieter, softer, not the silence of grief, but of peace finally settling after a long storm. The world that once looked away has turned its gaze back. People speak her name with sympathy now, but I no longer crave their pity. I only crave her memory, alive, untainted by their lies. I bring white lilies, her favorite, and lay them on the water where her reflection once shimmered. The surface ripples gently, as if she's reaching back, whispering that she finally rests. Her husband's family has become a story people whisper in hushed tones. A warning about pride, cruelty, and the cost of silence. Their house, once bright with laughter and luxury, now stands cold and empty. The neighbors say they moved away, unable to bear the stares, the shame. But it doesn't matter where they went. Their punishment follows them like a shadow. You can escape the law, but never the weight of what you've done. I don't smile often these days, but when I do, it's for her. Because I know justice came. Not through rage or fire, but through truth that refused to stay buried. The world may call it coincidence, but I know better. Every downfall, every broken tie, every sleepless night they endured was her voice echoing back through time. Noor didn't die in vain. Her silence became my weapon, and my silence became her justice. When I stand by her grave, I talk to her. I tell her how the world finally saw who they were, how their names are now cursed where they were once praised. I tell her I'm no longer angry, just tired. Tired of pretending that grief has an end. It doesn't. It simply changes shape. Mine has turned into strength, into a fire that no longer burns outward but warms me from within. I tell her I kept my promise, that those who threw her into darkness now live without light. Sometimes I hear her in the wind, faint, almost like a sigh, and I imagine her free, unburdened by fear or pain, watching from somewhere far kinder than this world. The water no longer frightens me. I can look at it now without breaking. I see it as the mirror of my vengeance, calm on the surface, but deep, relentless underneath. I think of the woman I was before that night, trusting, gentle, believing in the goodness of people. That woman died with Noor. What remained was something else, something quieter, sharper, and unyielding. Now, when I leave the lake, I never look back. I don't need to. The past no longer chases me, it obeys me. The family that took my daughter's life thought they could erase her story. But they didn't understand. Some stories are written not on paper, but in blood and memory. And mine will be told, long after their names are forgotten.